The crimson skies of Pyrrhion blazed with the eternal fire that had sustained the Pyroxian civilization for millennia. In the heart of the molten plains stood Thalia, the bright volcano city, a magnificent marvel of basalt and crystallized magma flowing through intricate canal networks. The city pulsed with life, its architecture both defying and embracing the dangerous beauty of its environment. Towers of obsidian stretched toward the ash-laden atmosphere, their surfaces reflecting the fiery glow of the planet's surface. In this world of perpetual heat and flames lived the Pyroxians, beings who had evolved to harness thermal energy as naturally as humans breathed air. Their bodies glowed with an inner fire, skin resembling cooling lava, obsidian black, crisscrossed with veins of smoldering embers. The Taurus galaxy had entered the post-artificial intelligence era, and while many civilizations had abandoned their mystical practices, the Pyroxians clung to their ancient blood rites with fervent devotion. Within the highest spire of the Solaris Citadel, the royal palace of Thalia, Princess Ariella Pyrrhos stood alone. Her chambers were sparse compared to the opulence expected of royalty. No fabrics adorned the walls, no ornate furniture graced the corners, nothing that could burst into flames at her touch. Since her 13th birthday, when the curse had first manifested, she had lived in deliberate isolation. The servants called her Ashborn behind her back, a name that had once hurt, but now merely echoed the truth of her existence. Ariella approached the basalt balcony overlooking the city, careful not to brush against the crystal railings. Below, Pyroxians moved through their daily lives, their fiery essence painting rivers of light through Thalia's streets. She longed to join them, to feel the communal warmth of her people without fearing she might reduce them to cinders. "Your Highness," a voice called from behind the heavy door. "The flame-rite preparations are complete. The court awaits your presence." Ariella closed her eyes, steadying herself. "I will be there shortly," she replied, her voice carrying the strength she had cultivated through years of practiced control. Today was her coronation day, or it should have been. As the heir to the throne, she was to receive the elemental crown, the ancient symbol of Pyroxian sovereignty. But how could she claim her birthright when everything she touched disintegrated into ash? She donned her ceremonial attire, crafted specially to minimize contact with her skin, a gown of woven obsidian threads and volcanic glass, adorned with fire opals that caught and refracted light. The royal attendants had laid it out without approaching her directly. Piece by piece, with practiced precision, she clothed herself without assistance. As Ariella made her way through the palace corridors, servants and courtiers pressed themselves against the walls, their eyes downcast in a mixture of respect and fear. The corridor opened into the Moonfire Hall, an immense chamber with a ceiling that mimicked the night sky, punctuated by suspended flames that served as stars. At the center stood a raised dais of pure basalt, upon which rested the elemental crown, a circlet of rare metals forged in the heart of Pyrrhion itself, embedded with crystals that captured and amplified thermal energy. The assembled court fell silent as she entered. Among them stood the Grand Chancellor Voron Talkrios, his ancient face a mask of political calculation. For years, he had been the true power behind the throne, guiding Pyrrhion with a heavy hand, while Ariella remained sequestered in her chambers. Today, that was meant to change. "The Princess Ariella Pyrrhos," announced the royal herald, his voice echoing through the vast hall. "Heir to the flame throne of Pyrrhion, keeper of the eternal fire, and guardian of the Taurus Accords." Ariella moved with deliberate steps toward the dais, feeling the weight of 1,000 eyes upon her. The traditional flame rite required her to take the crown with her bare hands, channeling her inherent thermal energy to form a bond with the ancient relic, a bond that would legitimize her rule. Just as she reached the dais, the heavy doors of the Moonfire Hall burst open once more. A figure, unlike any in the room, entered, a human, tall and confident, wearing the formal attire of an ambassador. His skin lacked the fiery glow of the Pyroxians, appearing almost alarmingly cool in the heated chamber. "Cade Lennox," the herald announced, confusion evident in his tone. "Ambassador of the Human Alliance, arrives to present his credentials to the court of Pyrrhion." Whispers erupted throughout the hall. The timing was unprecedented. No foreign dignitary should have been granted entry during the sacred flame rite. Ariella caught Voron's eyes, noting a flicker of something that might have been satisfaction crossing his features before it was quickly masked. But there was no time to ponder this breach of protocol. The ceremony had begun, and the court's attention returned to her. With carefully controlled movements, Ariella approached the elemental crown. She removed her ceremonial gloves, revealing hands that appeared normal, except for the faintest trace of ash, perpetually clinging to her fingertips. "I, Ariella Pyrrhos," she spoke, her voice carrying across the silent hall, "claim my birthright as sovereign of Pyrrhion, keeper of the sacred flame that burns within us all." She reached for the crown, her fingers hovering momentarily above its gleaming surface. A collective breath was held throughout the hall. Then, with determination hardening her resolve, she grasped the ancient symbol of power. The effect was instantaneous. Where her fingers touched the metal, it began to darken. Tiny particles of ash drifted upward as the crown began to crumble at her touch. Gasps of horror echoed through the chamber as the sacred relic, forged thousands of years ago, disintegrated in the princess's hands. But something unexpected happened. As the crown deteriorated, a pattern emerged in the floating ash, the unmistakable shape of a flame rising upward, hanging suspended in the air for several heartbeats before dispersing. And, at the base of the disintegrating crown, where only moments ago had been solid metal, a glowing inscription appeared, ancient Pyroxian symbols, burning with an inner light. "All I touch, to ash shall turn. Save the stranger from humankind." Ariella translated in a whisper, her voice barely audible. Chaos erupted in the court. Guards moved toward the princess, uncertain whether to arrest or protect her. Nobles backed away in terror. Through the confusion, Ariella's gaze found the human ambassador, who stood unmoving, his expression a mixture of fascination and concern rather than fear. "Seize her!" Voron's voice cut through the pandemonium. "The princess bears the ash curse. She has destroyed our most sacred relic." Guards hesitated, torn between loyalty to the crown and fear of the curse. In their moment of indecision, Ariella made a choice. She would not be taken prisoner in her own palace. With surprising speed, she moved toward the nearest wall, pressing her palm against the ancient basalt. The stone crumbled instantly, creating an opening to the adjacent corridor. As she fled through the self-made exit, she nearly collided with the human ambassador, who had somehow anticipated her escape route. "Your Highness," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos. "I believe I might be of assistance." Before she could respond, more guards rounded the corner, acting on instinct. Ariella reached out to touch the wall beside them, causing a cascade of ash that temporarily blinded her pursuers. In the confusion, her hand brushed against Cade's arm. She recoiled immediately, expecting to hear his scream as his flesh turned to ash. But the scream never came. Instead, the human ambassador looked down at his arm, then back at her, his eyes wide with wonder rather than pain. "Interesting," he said simply. The words of the inscription flashed through Ariella's mind. "Save the stranger from humankind." Could it be possible? Was this human somehow immune to her curse? There was no time to ponder. The guards were regrouping, and Voron's voice could be heard ordering a palace-wide search. "Come with me," Cade said, offering his hand. "I know a way out." Against every instinct honed by years of isolation, Ariella took his hand. The sensation was extraordinary, the simple touch of another living being without destruction following in its wake. For the first time in years, she felt a flicker of hope. Together, they disappeared into the labyrinthine corridors of the Solaris Citadel, leaving behind a court in disarray and a future suddenly uncertain. As they navigated the lesser-known passages of the palace, Ariella studied the human ambassador with newfound curiosity. Unlike the Pyroxians, whose inner fire gave their skin a perpetual glow, Cade's complexion remained steadfastly cool, almost pale in the volcanic light of the corridors. His movements were fluid and confident, suggesting he had prepared for contingencies beyond a simple diplomatic mission. "How do you know these passages?" Ariella asked, as they descended a rarely used stairwell. "Part of my job is to know things," Cade replied with a hint of a smile. "The Human Alliance doesn't send unprepared ambassadors, especially to worlds as politically complex as Pyrrhion." They emerged into a lower level of the palace, where the air grew thicker with volcanic gases and heat. Most Pyroxians found these conditions comfortable, but Ariella noticed beads of sweat forming on Cade's brow. "We need to find somewhere safe," she said. "Somewhere to understand what happened back there." "I have quarters in the diplomatic section," Cade offered. "But they'll search there first." Ariella considered their options. "There's someone who might help us. Saranel Fireseer, an elder fire witch who served as my mentor before." She trailed off, gesturing at her hands. "Before the curse manifested fully. Can we trust her?" "She's no friend of Voron's," Ariella said. "That alone makes her valuable right now." They made their way through service tunnels and maintenance shafts, avoiding the main thoroughfares where guards would be searching. Ariella led them deeper into the city, away from the palace and toward the ancient district where the traditional fire temples stood. As they moved, Cade spoke. "Your Highness, I should tell you, my arrival during your coronation wasn't coincidental. I received intelligence that something might happen today, something that could affect the alliance between our peoples." Ariella stopped, turning to face him. "You knew about the curse?" "Not specifically, no. But there were rumors of instability in the Pyroxian court. Whispers that Chancellor Voron had plans that didn't align with continued peaceful relations with humans." He hesitated. "The timing of my arrival was deliberate, a show of Human Alliance presence during a crucial transition of power. And now you're harboring a fugitive princess who turns everything she touches to ash," Ariella said bitterly. "Except you. Apparently, that wasn't in your diplomatic briefing, I imagine." Cade's expression softened. "No, that was unexpected, but not unwelcome, if it means I can help." They continued in silence until reaching a modest dwelling built into the side of an inactive lava tube. Unlike the grand structures of the palace, this building embraced a more ancient architectural style, with symbols of the old ways carved into its basalt walls. Ariella approached the door, then hesitated. "I can't knock without destroying the door." Cade stepped forward and rapped his knuckles against the heated stone. Moments later, the door swung open to reveal an elderly Pyroxian woman. Unlike most of her kind, whose inner fire burned bright orange or red, Saranel's glow had faded to a deep, smoldering burgundy, the mark of extreme age among her people. "I've been expecting you, child," Saranel said, her ancient eyes moving from Ariella to Cade. "Though not with human company. Interesting times indeed." She stepped aside, gesturing for them to enter. "Come quickly. The Chancellor's guards have been through this district twice already." The interior of Saranel's dwelling was a stark contrast to the minimalist royal chambers Ariella had grown accustomed to. Every surface was covered with artifacts, ancient scrolls, crystalline vessels containing various colored flames, and shelves lined with texts that predated the modern Pyroxian era. "The flame rite failed," Ariella said without preamble. "The crown turned to ash at my touch." "Yes," Saranel nodded, "as was foretold." "Foretold?" Cade asked. "You knew this would happen?" The Elder Fire Witch moved to a carved stone cabinet, retrieving a scroll encased in a heat-resistant transparent tube. Not with certainty, but with strong suspicion. The signs have been present since the princess's curse first manifested. She carefully unrolled the ancient document on a table of polished obsidian. The script was in ancient Pyroxian, barely recognizable even to Ariella. "This is from the First Flame era," Saranel explained. "Before our people fully understood the power of our blood rights, it speaks of a curse, the Ash Curse, that appears only once every 7 generations in the royal bloodline." Ariella leaned closer, careful not to touch the fragile document. "Why wasn't I told of this?" "Because knowledge of it was suppressed," Saranel said grimly. "By the same lineage that has held the Chancellor's position for the past 12 generations. The Talcreos family." "Voron's family," Ariella breathed. "Indeed. They've long served as protectors of the royal line, but their true purpose has been control. The Ash Curse is not a natural occurrence. It's engineered, a blood magic ritual performed in secret on royal children deemed potentially problematic." Cade studied the ancient text. "And this part here," he pointed to a section near the bottom. "Is this where the exception is mentioned? The human exception?" Saranel nodded, impressed. "You read ancient Pyroxian?" "I'm a quick study," he replied modestly. "Part of diplomatic training includes linguistic adaptability. It states that the Cursed One will turn all they touch to ash, save for the Outlander with cool blood, which, in ancient times, would have referred to any non-Pyroxian." "But why?" Ariella asked. "Why create a curse with such a specific exception?" "Control," Cade suggested, before Saranel could answer. "Isolation with a single point of contact. If you can touch only one person, you become dependent on them." "Precisely," Saranel confirmed. "The Talcreos family has maintained power by keeping the royal line dependent on their council. When a particularly independent or strong-willed heir appears, they become candidates for the curse." Ariella's inner fire flared with anger, her eyes glowing brighter. "So Voron did this to me? He's been planning this for years?" "Most likely," Saranel said. "But I don't believe he anticipated a human ambassador arriving at the precise moment of your coronation. That complicates his plans considerably." "The inscription on the crown," Ariella remembered. "When it turned to ash, words appeared. All I touch, to ash shall turn. Save the stranger from humankind." It wasn't referring to just any human, but specifically to Cade. "The curse adapts to present circumstances," Saranel explained. "It identified the most suitable Outlander present at the moment of its full activation." Cade looked troubled. "So I'm now bound to this curse as well? The only person the princess can touch without destroying?" "In essence, yes," Saranel confirmed. "Which makes you both extremely valuable and in grave danger. Voron will not allow such a wild variable to upset generations of carefully laid plans." A distant commotion caught their attention, the sound of armored guards moving through the district. "They're conducting a more thorough search now," Saranel said, moving quickly to gather supplies. "You cannot stay here. They'll search my dwelling eventually." "Where can we go?" Ariella asked. "The entire city will be looking for us." "Not the city," Saranel said. "Beyond it, to the Flame Sanctum in the ancient caldera. There you might find answers about reversing the curse." "The Flame Sanctum has been sealed for centuries," Ariella protested. "To most, yes, but not to those with royal blood, nor to those immune to fire's touch." The elder witch pressed a small crystal into Cade's hand. "This will guide you. It responds to the princess's bloodline and to the unique signature of one who can withstand her touch." The crystal glowed faintly, a deep amber light emanating from its core. "Take the maintenance tunnels beneath the lava canals," Saranel instructed. "They lead beyond the city walls without passing any checkpoints." "Come with us," Ariella urged. Saranel shook her head. "I must remain to mislead them. Besides, Old bones like mine would only slow your journey. She clasped Ariella's shoulders, unafraid of the curse. My time with the living flame grows short regardless, child. But you must reclaim your birthright and break the Telkrios' hold on our people. The sounds of searching guards grew closer. Go, Saranel urged. And remember, the curse was created by blood magic. Only blood magic can undo it. With heavy hearts, Ariella and Cade slipped out through a hidden passage behind Saranel's dwelling, the amber crystal lighting their way as they descended into the ancient tunnels beneath Thalia. Behind them, they heard Saranel begin an incantation, a fire witch's final spell, one that would ensure no pursuers followed their path, but at great cost to the caster. The maintenance tunnels beneath Thalia's lava canals were a labyrinth of ancient engineering, designed in an era when the Pyroxians were still mastering the art of harnessing their planet's molten energy. Unlike the polished basalt and crystal of the city above, these passages were rough-hewn, the walls occasionally seeping with magma that had forced its way through tiny fissures. For Ariella, the environment was merely uncomfortable. The extreme heat and toxic gases were irritants rather than threats to a Pyroxian. But Cade struggled visibly, his human physiology ill-suited to such conditions. Sweat poured from his brow, and his breathing grew increasingly labored. We should rest, Ariella suggested, after they had traveled for what felt like hours. They had reached a junction where cooler air circulated from a ventilation shaft. Cade nodded gratefully, sinking to his knees. From his diplomatic pack, he retrieved a small device that, when activated, created a thin barrier of cooler air around him. Human technology, he explained, noting Ariella's curious expression. Thermal regulation field, standard issue for diplomats to extreme environments. Why didn't you activate it earlier? Limited power supply. I'm saving it for when conditions become truly unbearable. He took a careful sip from a water container. Your people's definition of habitable is quite different from ours. Despite the dire circumstances, Ariella found herself smiling. I've read about Earth. All that water, everywhere. It seems equally inhospitable to me. I suppose it's all a matter of perspective. Cade agreed. While he rested, he studied the amber crystal Saranel had given them. Its glow pulsed gently, indicating a direction through one of the tunnel branches. This crystal, it's not just a guide, is it? Ariella shook her head. It's a blood key, ancient Pyroxian technology infused with blood magic. They were used before modern biometric systems, keyed to specific bloodlines. And this one responds to both your royal blood and whatever quality makes me immune to your touch, Cade mused. Fascinating technology. Not technology as your people understand it, Ariella corrected. Magic and science were never fully separated in Pyroxian culture. What humans might call supernatural, we simply consider an aspect of nature we've learned to manipulate. A distant rumbling interrupted their conversation. Not the usual seismic activity of Pyrrhion, but something more deliberate. Explosions. They're sealing the tunnels, Ariella realized with alarm. We need to move, now. They hurried forward, following the crystal's guidance through increasingly narrow and ancient passages. The air grew hotter, the walls more unstable. Several times they were forced to change course when they encountered collapsed sections or flows of fresh magma cutting across their path. The crystal is leading us deeper, Cade observed. Shouldn't we be trying to reach the surface? The flame sanctum isn't on the surface, Ariella explained. It's at the heart of the ancient caldera, where the first Pyroxians communed with the planet's core fire. The most direct route is through the deep paths. As they pushed onward, Cade's thermal regulator began to fail intermittently, the strain of the extreme environment overwhelming its systems. His pace slowed, and Ariella noticed with concern that his skin had taken on an alarming redness. You're burning, she said, stopping abruptly. I'll manage, he insisted, though pain was evident in his voice. No, Ariella said firmly. Even if you're immune to my curse, you're not immune to Pyrrhian itself. She looked around desperately, then spotted a narrow side passage where the heat seemed less intense. This way. The passage opened into a small chamber that had once been a maintenance station. Ancient tools lay scattered about, and the walls were inscribed with technical notations from centuries past. Most importantly, a small thermal regulator still functioned, keeping the ambient temperature lower than the surrounding tunnels. Rest here, Ariella instructed. I'll scout ahead. We shouldn't separate, Cade argued. I move faster alone, and these conditions don't affect me as they do you. I won't go far, just enough to ensure the path ahead is passable. Reluctantly, Cade agreed, settling down to allow his own thermal regulator time to recharge. Before Ariella left, he caught her hand, an action so natural yet so profound given her condition. Be careful, he said, not just of the environment, but of pursuers. Vorin struck me as a man with extensive resources. I've spent my life being careful, Ariella replied with a grim smile. It becomes second nature when your touch brings destruction. She ventured further down the main tunnel, the blood key crystal lighting her way. The passages grew increasingly primitive, transitioning from engineered tunnels to natural volcanic tubes formed eons ago. The heat intensified, and even Ariella, with her pyroxian physiology, began to feel the strain. After about 20 minutes of careful exploration, she reached a dramatic overlook. The tunnel opened onto a vast underground cavern, illuminated by rivers of flowing magma far below. Suspended above this molten lake was an ancient structure, a temple of sorts, built on a massive outcropping of heat-resistant crystal. Bridges of the same material stretched from various tunnel openings to the central structure. The Flame Sanctum. It had to be. The ancient holy site matched descriptions from the historical texts she had studied as a child. Texts that many believed were more legend than fact. As Ariella stood transfixed by the sight, a small movement caught her eye. On one of the distant bridges, figures moved with purpose toward the sanctum. Their armor gleamed in the magma's light, the distinctive battle gear of the Flame Guard, Vorin's elite troops. They weren't the only ones searching the ancient tunnels, and they were heading directly for the sanctum. Ariella raced back through the tunnels, desperate to reach Cade before the Flame Guard discovered their presence. As she rounded the final bend, she collided with him. He had grown concerned by her prolonged absence and set out to find her. They're here, she gasped. Vorin's Flame Guard. They're heading for the sanctum. How? We had a head start. They must know these tunnels better than we anticipated. Or... A terrible thought occurred to her. Or they were always heading there. Perhaps Vorin knew that's where we would go. If that's true, then Serenel... Cade couldn't finish the thought. We have to assume Vorin knows everything. That he's been planning this for longer than we can imagine. Ariella's inner fire flared with determination. But he doesn't know about you, about what your presence means for the curse. Which gives us an advantage, Cade nodded. But not much of one if we're cornered in these tunnels. What's our plan? We need to reach the sanctum before they secure it completely, Ariella decided. There's more than one approach. I saw at least 3 bridges spanning the magma lake. And once we're there, what exactly are we looking for? Answers. A way to break the curse. And perhaps, Ariella hesitated, perhaps a way to expose Vorin's treachery to all of Pyrrhian. They moved with renewed purpose. Ariella leading them through the twisting passages by memory, now, rather than following the crystal's guidance directly. Her strategy was to approach the sanctum from an unexpected direction, hopefully avoiding the Flame Guard patrols. As they neared another overlook, they heard voices echoing through the tunnels, harsh, militant tones giving orders, Pyroxian voices, but with an unfamiliar accent. "That's not the flame guard," Ariella whispered, pulling Cade into a recess in the tunnel wall. A patrol of 6 soldiers passed by their hiding place, close enough that Ariella could have reached out and touched them. Their armor was not the traditional obsidian plates of Pyroxian design, but something lighter, more flexible, with embedded technology that pulsed with blue energy. A stark contrast to the red-orange glow of everything native to Pyrrhion. "Albae Empire troops," Cade whispered, once they had passed. "What are Imperial soldiers doing here, so deep in Pyroxian territory?" "The Albae Empire has been our traditional enemy for centuries," Ariella explained. "But there's been an uneasy peace since the Taris Accords were signed 50 years ago. Their presence here violates every treaty in existence." "Unless they were invited," Cade suggested grimly. "Vorin," Ariella hissed, the name like ash in her mouth. "He's consorting with our greatest enemies. But why? What could the Albae Empire offer that would be worth such treachery?" "Power, technology, perhaps promises of autonomy in an imperial system," Cade theorized. "The Human Alliance has intelligence suggesting the Empire has been making overtures to several worlds in this sector, offering favorable terms in exchange for allegiance." "And a marriage alliance?" Ariella wondered aloud. "If I were removed from succession, Vorin could install a puppet ruler, perhaps even arrange a marriage to an imperial noble." They waited until the sound of the patrol faded completely, before continuing their journey. The presence of Albae troops complicated matters significantly. Not only did they have to avoid Vorin's flame guard, but also the forces of an enemy empire. When they finally reached a vantage point overlooking the magma chamber again, they saw that the situation had deteriorated further. Albae soldiers now stood guard on 2 of the 3 bridges Ariella had previously observed. The third bridge, the furthest from their position, appeared unguarded, but it was also the most exposed, with no cover for much of its length. "That's our only option," Ariella said, pointing to the unguarded bridge. "We'll have to time our crossing carefully, between patrol rotations." Cade studied the movements of the guards. "They're changing positions every 15 minutes. There's a window of about 30 seconds when the sight lines are compromised." 30 seconds to cross a 100-meter bridge over a lake of magma," Ariella summarized. "Not ideal." "No," Cade agreed. "But we don't have the luxury of ideal circumstances." They worked their way around the chamber's edge, using natural formations as cover. The heat grew increasingly intense as they neared the bridge, the air shimmering with thermal distortion. Cade's thermal regulator struggled to compensate, but he pressed on without complaint. When they reached the bridge's entrance, they paused, watching the guard rotations carefully. The structure itself was ancient, but remarkably preserved, a testament to the engineering skills of early Pyroxians. Made from a heat-resistant crystal, similar to diamond, but with greater flexibility, it spanned the magma lake in a single, graceful arch. "Next rotation in 20 seconds, Cade whispered, checking a small device he carried. "Ready?" Ariella nodded, her eyes fixed on the distant sanctum. Whatever answers lay within, they were her only hope of breaking free from Vorin's machinations and reclaiming her birthright. "Now," Cade urged, as the guards moved to their new positions, temporarily creating a blind spot. They raced across the bridge, their footsteps eerily silent on the crystalline surface. The heat from the magma below was overwhelming, causing Cade's thermal regulator to emit warning signals. Halfway across, disaster struck. A piece of the ancient structure, weakened by millennia of heat exposure, cracked beneath Cade's foot. The sound echoed through the vast chamber. On the distant bridges, guards turned toward the noise. "Run!" Ariella urged, abandoning stealth for speed. They sprinted the remaining distance, energy weapons fire from Albae rifles sizzling past them. As they reached the far side, Cade stumbled, a glancing shot having caught his leg. Ariella reached for him instinctively, then hesitated. Would her curse extend to his clothes, his equipment? Would she only make his injury worse? "Take my hand," Cade insisted through gritted teeth. We don't have time for caution. Trusting in the exception that had spared him thus far, Ariella grasped his arm and helped him into the shelter of the sanctum's entrance. Behind them, guards from both factions were mobilizing, orders being shouted across the chamber. The Flame Sanctum's entrance was a massive archway, carved with ancient Pyroxian symbols, many of which even Ariella couldn't decipher. Beyond it lay a circular chamber with a domed ceiling, its walls lined with niches containing eternal flames, small, self-sustaining thermal reactions that had burned continuously for thousands of years. We need to seal the entrance, Cade said, examining the ancient mechanism beside the door. Allow me. Ariella placed her hand against the stone beside the archway. As expected, it began to crumble under her touch, but in a controlled manner, as if the structure recognized her intent. The resulting cascade of ash and debris effectively blocked the entrance, at least temporarily. With a moment of relative safety secured, Ariella turned her attention to Cade's injury. The energy weapon had seared through his diplomatic attire, leaving an angry burn on his calf. It looks worse than it is, he assured her, though his face was pale with pain. The shot just grazed me. Even a graze from an Albe weapon can be serious, Ariella said. Their technology is designed to cause maximum damage with minimal energy expenditure. From a recess in the wall, she retrieved a vessel containing a glowing orange substance. Not quite liquid, not quite flame. This is pure thermal essence. It has healing properties for Pyroxians, but I'm not sure how it will affect a human. At this point, Cade said with a grim smile, I'm willing to risk it. Carefully, using a ceremonial tool rather than her bare hands, Ariella applied a small amount of the essence to Cade's wound. He gasped as it made contact, but the pain in his expression quickly gave way to surprise. It's cooling, he said wonderingly, like a soothing balm. Interesting, Ariella observed. For a Pyroxian, it would feel warming. Our physiologies truly are complementary opposites. While the essence worked to heal Cade's injury, Ariella explored the central chamber. At its heart stood a raised platform of the same crystalline material as the bridge, beneath which magma flowed in carefully engineered channels. Ancient instruments and artifacts were arranged around the platform, their purpose not immediately obvious, even to someone with Ariella's royal education. What is this place exactly? Cade asked, testing his weight on his injured leg and finding it much improved. The birthplace of Pyroxian civilization, Ariella explained. According to our oldest texts, this is where our ancestors first learned to channel the planet's thermal energy, where blood and fire were first merged to create what we now call blood magic. She approached a series of carved panels that encircled the central platform. These tell the story of our origins, how the first Pyroxians were ordinary beings who discovered they could absorb and redirect thermal energy, how they developed rituals to pass this ability through bloodlines, eventually evolving into the species we are today. And somewhere in that history lies the secret of the Ash Curse, Cade surmised, joining her at the panels. Not just the curse, Ariella said, her fingers hovering over one particular carving without touching it. Look at this. The panel depicted a ritual scene, Pyroxians gathered around a central figure, whose hands were extended toward what appeared to be a non-Pyroxian being. The purifying flame ritual, Ariella breathed. I thought it was just a legend, a metaphor from our religious texts, but it was real. What does it do? According to the old stories, it was a way to cleanse blood magic gone wrong, to reset manipulated bloodlines to their original state. Her eyes shone with renewed hope. If this ritual still exists, if we can decipher how to perform it, then we might be able to break your curse, Cade finished. Their moment of discovery was interrupted by a thunderous impact against the blocked entrance. The Albi and Flameguard forces had arrived and were attempting to breach their makeshift barrier. We don't have much time, Cade said urgently. What do we need for this ritual? Ariella studied the panels intently, moving around the chamber to follow the sequential story they told. According to this, we need the blood of the cursed, freely given, a vessel of pure fire from the planet's heart. She continued reading. And the willing sacrifice of the immune one. She turned to Cade, her expression grave. The immune one, that's you. The ritual requires your sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Cade asked, his voice steady despite the implications. Another impact shook the chamber, dislodging ancient dust from the dome ceiling. It doesn't specify, Ariella said, frustration evident in her tone. These texts are deliberately enigmatic, designed to be interpreted only by those trained in the old ways. Like Saranel, Cade said. Yes, but she's not here, and we're running out of time. Ariella moved to the central platform, examining the instruments arranged there. These must be the tools for the ritual, but I don't know how to use them correctly. The barricaded entrance was beginning to give way, ash and debris falling as powerful energy weapons cut through from the other side. We have to try something, Cade insisted. Even without knowing the exact procedure. Blood of the cursed, freely given, Ariella repeated, picking up a ceremonial blade using one of the tools to avoid touching it directly. That part seems straightforward enough. With careful precision, she used the blade to make a small cut on her palm. Her blood was unusual, even by Pyroxian standards, darker than normal, with tiny particles of ash suspended within it. She allowed several drops to fall onto the central platform. A vessel of pure fire from the planet's heart, she continued, looking around. That must refer to the thermal essence. Cade retrieved the vessel they had used to treat his wound, placing it beside the drops of blood on the platform. And the willing sacrifice of the immune one, Ariella said, looking at Cade with concern. But what does that mean? Before Cade could respond, a section of the barricade collapsed entirely. Through the opening, they could see Albi soldiers and Flame Guard working in uneasy tandem, united only in their determination to capture the princess and her human companion. I think, Cade said slowly, it means this. He placed his hand directly onto Ariella's bloodstain on the platform, then into the thermal essence. Instead of burning him, as such intense heat should, the essence seemed to flow around his fingers, interacting with Ariella's blood to create a swirling pattern of light. Cade, what are you? The willing sacrifice might not be my life, he explained, his voice tight with pain despite his earlier assertion about the essence's cooling properties, but rather my immunity. I'm offering to share in your curse, Ariella. The swirling pattern intensified, climbing up Cade's arm like living flame. His expression reflected increasing pain, but he didn't withdraw his hand. Stop, Ariella cried. You don't know what this will do to you. No, he agreed. But I know what will happen if we do nothing. Vorin wins. The Albi Empire gains a foothold on Pyrrhion, and you remain cursed, unable to claim your rightful place. The pattern had now encompassed his entire body, a network of fiery lines that mimicked the circulation system of a Pyroxian. When it reached his face, his eyes began to glow with an inner light similar to Ariella's own. The soldiers had cleared enough of the barricade to begin entering the chamber. Leading them was a figure Ariella recognized all too well, Vorin Talkrios himself, accompanied by a regal-looking Albi in imperial armor. Stop them, Vorin commanded. The ritual cannot be completed. But his orders came too late. The fiery pattern surrounding Cade suddenly contracted, condensing into his chest before exploding outward in a wave of pure thermal energy. The force knocked everyone in the chamber off their feet. Soldiers, Vorin, the Albi noble, and Ariella herself. When the energy dissipated, Ariella looked up to see Cade still standing on the platform, but transformed. His skin now held a faint glow, similar to a Pyroxian's, though muted by his human physiology. More importantly, The thermal essence and her blood had vanished from the platform, absorbed into his being. "The purifying flame!" Vorin gasped, his composure shattered. "Impossible! That ritual was expunged from all records centuries ago." "Not all records, Chancellor," Ariella said, rising to her feet. With deliberate motion, she extended her hand toward a fallen piece of debris. Instead of turning to ash at her touch, it merely warmed, the surface glowing faintly where her fingers made contact. The curse was altered, if not broken entirely. "What have you done?" the Albi noble demanded, his accent thick, but his pyroxian comprehensible. "Prince Cassian," Cade addressed him directly, surprising everyone with his knowledge of the Imperial's identity. "Your secret alliance with Chancellor Vorin has been built on quicksand. The control he promised over the Pyroxian throne no longer exists." "Lies!" Vorin hissed, but his eyes betrayed his fear. "The curse cannot be broken. It is woven into her very blood." "Not broken," Ariella corrected. "Transformed. Shared." She looked to Cade, understanding dawning. The willing sacrifice wasn't death. It was the sharing of a burden. She turned back to the assembled soldiers, noting their confusion as they looked between their leaders and the scene before them. "Chancellor Vorin engineered the Ash Curse to control me, to prevent me from taking my rightful place on the throne. And when that wasn't enough, he allied with the Albi Empire, our historical enemy, promising them influence over Pyrrhian in exchange for support." Murmurs spread through the Flameguard ranks. Even loyal to Vorin as they were, allying with the Albi crossed a line few Pyroxians would tolerate. "Seize them both," Vorin commanded, but his authority was clearly wavering. Prince Cassian, sensing the shifting tide, took a different approach. He stepped forward, extending his hand toward the central platform. "If the curse is truly transformed, then surely I may touch the sacred artifacts without consequence as well." Before anyone could stop him, he grasped one of the ancient instruments on the platform. Immediately, it began to crumble to ash in his hand, the destruction spreading up his arm. Unlike Ariella's controlled curse, this reaction was violent and unpredictable. "What is happening?" the prince screamed, trying desperately to brush away the rapidly spreading ash. "The sanctum recognizes your intent," Ariella said, understanding flowing from some deep ancestral knowledge awakened by the ritual. "You came here with destruction in your heart, and so destruction is returned to you." Vorin, seeing his imperial ally consumed by the very curse he had engineered, made a desperate move. From his ceremonial robes, he drew a weapon unlike any Pyroxian design, a sword encased in a field of extreme cold, the antithesis of all Pyroxian technology. "Icebrand!" one of the Flameguard gasped. "The forbidden weapon! If I cannot control the throne, then there shall be no throne," Vorin declared, lunging toward Ariella with the frozen blade. Cade moved with unexpected speed, intercepting the blow. The Icebrand struck his shoulder, the freezing field clashing with his newly acquired thermal nature. Ice and fire met in a catastrophic reaction that threw both men backward. Vorin recovered first, advancing again with murder in his eyes. But Ariella had seen enough. Drawing upon the transformed power within her, she reached out, not to touch, but to command the very essence of heat itself. "I am fire," she declared, her voice resonating with newfound authority. "I do not fear ash." From her outstretched hands, waves of controlled thermal energy swept through the chamber. Unlike the destructive touch of her curse, this was focused, precise, incapacitating Vorin and the Albi soldiers while leaving the Flameguard unharmed. Vorin fell to his knees, the Icebrand clattering uselessly to the ground as the cold field dissipated. Before him stood Ariella, no longer the cursed princess, but something new, a ruler who had faced her greatest weakness and transformed it into strength. "Chancellor Vorin Talcrios," she pronounced formally, "you are stripped of your title and authority for crimes against the throne of Pyrrhian and for treasonous collusion with the Albai Empire. She turned to the Flame Guard, many of whom were now kneeling in recognition of her authority. Escort the former Chancellor and Prince Cassian to the palace. They will face formal judgment before the full court. As the soldiers moved to obey, Ariella turned her attention to Cade. He lay where he had fallen, the wound from the ice brand a stark white against his now glowing skin. "Cade," she whispered, kneeling beside him. "What have you done to yourself?" His eyes flickered open, the human brown now threaded with pyroxian fire. "What was necessary," he replied weakly. "What any diplomat would do to ensure peace between worlds." "This goes far beyond diplomacy," Ariella said, cradling his head gently. Where their skin touched, there was no destruction, only a harmonious exchange of energy, warming him while cooling her. "You've changed yourself fundamentally." "As have you," he observed. "Your curse." "Transformed," she confirmed. "I can touch without destroying now, though there seems to be a thermal reaction. And you've taken some of my pyroxian nature into yourself." "An equitable exchange." Cade managed to smile despite his pain. "The human alliance values fair trade agreements." A contingent of Flame Guard approached, led by a captain who appeared uncertain how to address the transformed princess. "Your Highness," he ventured cautiously, "we await your commands." Ariella rose, her decision made. "Captain, I require a medical transport for Ambassador Lennox. He is to receive the highest care our healers can provide. Then prepare a secure escort to return to Thalia. It's time I reclaimed my throne." The journey back to the capital was markedly different from their desperate flight through the maintenance tunnels. The Flame Guard, having witnessed Voron's treachery firsthand, had transferred their loyalty to Ariella with remarkable swiftness. Their escort moved with efficiency through the main transit routes, clearing a path for the princess and her injured human companion. Cade, stabilized by pyroxian healers, familiar with thermal injuries, observed the changing landscape with new eyes. His partially transformed physiology perceived the world differently now. The heat signatures of every living being and molten flow visible to him in ways his human senses had never detected before. "Everything looks different," he remarked as they approached the outskirts of Thalia. "More alive." "You're seeing the thermal essence that flows through all things on Pyrrhion," Ariella explained. "It's how my people perceive the world naturally." "It's beautiful," Cade said simply. "Overwhelming, but beautiful." As their transport moved through the city streets, citizens emerged from their dwellings, word of the princess's return spreading faster than any official announcement. Many looked uncertain, having heard only rumors of the failed coronation and the ash curse. Others seemed hopeful, sensing that something fundamental had changed. When they reached the Solaris Citadel, they found the palace in a state of controlled chaos. Duke Erix Vandar, one of the few nobles who had maintained quiet support for Ariella even during her isolation, had taken temporary command of the royal guard. He greeted them at the entrance, bowing deeply to Ariella. "Your Highness," he said, his relief evident. "When we heard of Chancellor Voron's treachery, I feared the worst." "The situation is more complex than simple treachery, Duke Erix," Ariella replied. "Voron's conspiracy extends back generations, and his alliance with the Albai Empire threatens the very foundation of our world." "The court has assembled in the Moonfire Hall," Erix informed her. "News of your return and your transformation has reached them. They await your address." Ariella nodded, then glanced at Cade, who still needed support to walk. "Ambassador Lennox requires continued medical attention. His sacrifice made my return possible, and he will be treated with all honor." "Of course, Your Highness. I have already arranged for the royal healers to attend him in the diplomatic quarters." Cade shook his head. "I should be present for your address to the court. The human alliance must be represented at this crucial moment." "You can barely stand," Ariella pointed out. "A diplomat serves regardless of personal comfort." Cade insisted, with a stubborn set to his jaw that Ariella was coming to recognize. Very well, she conceded. But you will accept assistance, and you will allow the healers to attend you immediately afterward. With that compromise reached, they made their way to the Moonfire Hall. Unlike the ceremonial procession of the failed coronation, this entry was simpler, more direct, a ruler returning to claim her rightful place, not as a symbol, but as a leader tested by adversity. The assembled court fell silent as Ariella entered, many nobles gasping at the sight of her. Though her appearance had not changed dramatically, the absence of the perpetual ash that had clung to her for years was notable. More striking was the controlled confidence with which she moved, no longer afraid that an accidental touch would bring destruction. Vorin and Prince Cassian had been brought before the court as well, both bound and guarded. Vorin's expression was one of barely contained fury, while the Albay prince seemed almost catatonic, the encounter with the Sanctum's defensive magic having left deep psychological scars. Ariella ascended to the dais where, just days before, the elemental crown had turned to ash at her touch. The symbolism was not lost on anyone present. "Nobles of Pirion," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast hall. "I stand before you transformed, not just physically, but in purpose and understanding. The ash curse that prevented me from claiming the throne was no accident of fate, no divine judgment. It was a deliberate manipulation of our most sacred blood magic, perpetrated by the Talcrios family, for generations to control the royal bloodline." Murmurs of shock rippled through the assembly. Chancellor Vorin, continuing his family's tradition, engineered my curse. When that proved insufficient to maintain his control, he formed a secret alliance with the Albay Empire, offering them influence over our world in exchange for support of his regime. The murmurs grew louder. Many nobles looking at Vorin with expressions ranging from disgust to outright hatred. Relations with the Albay Empire had been strained for centuries, and the idea of a Pyroxian leader colluding with them was anathema. Through the ancient purifying flame ritual, performed in the Flame Sanctum with the willing sacrifice of Ambassador Lennox of the Human Alliance, the curse has been transformed. No longer a tool of destruction, it has become a connection, a bridge between Pyroxian and human that symbolizes the future I envision for our world. She gestured to Cade, who stood with dignity despite his injury. Ambassador Lennox now carries within him a part of Pyroxian essence, just as I carry a new understanding of human resilience. This transformation represents the path forward for Pirion, not isolation and adherence to manipulated traditions, but connection and growth through honest alliance. One of the elder nobles stepped forward, his inner fire burning a deep burgundy similar to Serenel's. "Your Highness, while the revelation of Chancellor Vorin's treachery is disturbing, the alteration of royal blood through ritual is unprecedented. The purifying flame is a legend, not an established succession protocol. The legends of our past are often the foundations of our future, Lord Corzin," Ariella replied. "The ritual I underwent is older than our current succession protocols. It dates from the First Flame era, when our ancestors were still discovering the potential of blood magic. It represents a return to the purity of our origins, not a deviation from them." "And what of the throne?" another noble questioned. "The elemental crown was destroyed. Without it, how can your rule be legitimized according to tradition?" Ariella had anticipated this question. The crown was a symbol, not the source of royal authority. That authority flows from the bloodline and the will of the people. She paused, looking around the assembly. "However, I recognize the importance of symbols in maintaining continuity." She turned to Cade, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they approached the center of the dais, where fragments of the destroyed crown had been preserved. Ariella extended her hand, no longer fearing what her touch might do. Where her fingers contacted the fragments, they began to glow, not disintegrating into ash, but transforming, restructuring. The metal and crystal seemed to liquefy, flowing together in patterns guided by her will. Cade placed his hand beside hers, his newly acquired thermal sense contributing to the process. Before the astonished court, a new crown took shape, similar to the original in basic form, but with subtle differences that reflected the transformation they had undergone. When it was complete, it shimmered with an inner fire that mirrored Ariella's own. "The Phoenix Crown," she declared, "born from the ashes of the old, just as Pyrrhion itself must be reborn from the ashes of Voron's conspiracy." She lifted the crown, holding it above her head for all to see. "I claim my birthright not through ancient ritual alone, but through the trials I have endured and the vision I offer for our future. A future where Pyrrhion stands strong in alliance with the human worlds, where our unique gifts are shared rather than hoarded, and where no family can manipulate blood magic to control another." With those words, she placed the crown upon her head. Unlike the traditional flame rite, there was no elaborate ceremony, only the simple, powerful act of a ruler claiming her rightful place. The response from the court was not immediate. For several long moments, silence reigned as nobles exchanged glances, weighing centuries of tradition against the undeniable reality before them. Then, Duke Eryx stepped forward, dropping to one knee. "Hail, Queen Ariella Pyrrhos, first of her name, bearer of the purifying flame, forger of the Phoenix Crown, and rightful ruler of Pyrrhion." One by one, other nobles followed his example, until the entire court knelt before their new queen, all except Voron, who remained standing, his expression twisted with hatred. "You may kneel, or you may face judgment standing, former Chancellor," Ariella said, addressing him directly. "Either way, your crimes will be answered for." "You think this transformation changes anything?" Voron spat. "You've only hastened the downfall of pure Pyroxian bloodlines. This abomination," he gestured contemptuously at Cade, "is proof of your unfitness to rule." "On the contrary," Ariella replied calmly. "Ambassador Lennox's willingness to share in what you intended as my curse demonstrates the strength that comes from alliance. A strength you feared, because it cannot be controlled through your family's blood manipulation." She turned to the court at large. "Chancellor Voron Talcrios is stripped of all titles and privileges. He and Prince Cassian will be held for formal trial, with representatives from both the Human Alliance and the Albay Empire invited to observe, ensuring transparency and justice." With that matter settled, at least temporarily, Ariella proceeded to her first acts as queen. She appointed Duke Eryx as interim chancellor, tasked with investigating the full extent of Voron's conspiracy and identifying any remaining loyalists within the government. She also established a commission to examine all historical records of blood magic, with the goal of identifying and neutralizing any other manipulations that might have been hidden in Pyroxian traditions. Throughout these proceedings, Cade remained at her side, though it became increasingly evident that his injury required attention. When the court session finally concluded, Ariella insisted he be escorted to the healers immediately. "Your tendency toward self-sacrifice is admirable but concerning," she told him, as royal healers prepared a thermal regeneration chamber. "The Human Alliance would be poorly served by an ambassador who worked himself to death." "I prefer to think of it as dedication to duty," Cade replied, with a weak smile. "And, speaking of duty, we need to discuss the formal alliance between Pyrrhion and the human worlds. Your transformation and ascension create unprecedented opportunities." "There will be time for diplomatic discussions after you've healed," Ariella assured him. "For now, rest and recover. That's a royal command, Ambassador." As the healers activated the regeneration chamber, bathing Cade in carefully calibrated thermal energy, Ariella found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point. From a cursed princess, unable to touch anything, without destroying it. She had become a queen with the power to transform, rather than destroy. And Cade, sent as a diplomatic observer, had become something more. A bridge between worlds in the most literal sense. The implications were vast, and not all positive. The Albi Empire would not take the exposure of their secret alliance with Vorin lightly. There would be factions within Pyroxian society resistant to the changes she proposed. And the physical transformation both she and Cade had undergone raised questions about their future that neither was prepared to answer yet. But for this moment, watching the healing energies restore her unlikely ally, her friend, Ariella allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. Not just for herself, but for Pyrrhion and its place in the galaxy. The weeks following Ariella's ascension to the throne were a whirlwind of activity. The formal trials of Vorin and Prince Cassian revealed the full extent of their conspiracy, a generations-long plan to maintain Talcrios' control over the throne, while gradually ceding sovereignty to the Alba Empire in exchange for technological advancements and political protection. The evidence was damning, leading to Vorin's permanent exile to the barren outer regions of Pyrrhion, where the volcanic activity was minimal, and a Pyroxian would live in perpetual discomfort. Prince Cassian was returned to the Empire with a formal diplomatic censure, sparking a political crisis within the imperial hierarchy that would keep them distracted for months, if not years. Meanwhile, Cade's recovery progressed steadily. The Pyroxian healers, fascinated by his unique hybrid physiology, developed new treatments specifically designed for his condition. As his strength returned, so did his diplomatic responsibilities. The Human Alliance, upon receiving his reports of the situation on Pyrrhion, immediately upgraded his status from ambassador to Alliance consul, granting him broader authority to negotiate a comprehensive treaty. Ariella found herself balancing the demands of rulership with her own adaptation to her transformed abilities. The purifying flame ritual had not removed her connection to thermal energy, but had refined it, giving her greater control. Where once her touch brought only destruction, now she could modulate the effect, warming, heating, or, in extreme cases, still reducing objects to ash if she consciously willed it. On a particularly challenging day, after hours of negotiations with conservative nobles resistant to her proposed reforms, Ariella sought refuge in the royal gardens, a unique Pyroxian creation where crystal formations bloomed in response to carefully directed heat. She found Cade already there, studying a particularly intricate crystal structure with evident fascination. Seeking escape from diplomatic duties, "Ambassador?" she asked, settling beside him on a bench of polished obsidian. "Consul, technically," he corrected with a smile, "and not escaping, preparing. The thermal patterns in these crystals remind me of the language structures in the ancient texts we found in the sanctum. I've been trying to decipher some of the more obscure passages." "Always working," Ariella observed, "even in moments of apparent leisure. A common human trait. I'm afraid, though perhaps less pronounced in me before our shared transformation." He gestured to his arm, where faint lines of Pyroxian fire could be seen beneath his skin in certain lights. "I find myself drawn to understanding the deeper connections between things now, a distinctly Pyroxian perspective, according to my research. And I find myself more impatient with circular traditions, more eager for direct action," Ariella admitted. "Perhaps we've exchanged more than just physiological traits." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the play of light through the crystal gardens. Their relationship had evolved in ways neither could have anticipated. The unique bond formed through the purifying flame created a connection that transcended traditional diplomatic or even personal relationships. They were, in some fundamental way, parts of a whole, distinct yet interconnected. "The Council has approved the final draft of the Alliance Treaty," Ariella said eventually. It will be ready for formal signing at tomorrow's ceremony. Excellent, Cade nodded. The terms are generous on both sides. The Human Alliance gains access to Pyroxian thermal technology, while Pyrian receives advanced medical and environmental engineering expertise. A fair exchange. There's one aspect we haven't discussed formally, Ariella said, her tone more hesitant than usual. The personal implications of our connection. Cade turned to face her fully. I've been giving that considerable thought as well. Our transformation creates certain diplomatic complications. I am no longer fully human. Yet I represent human interests. You carry elements of human adaptability, yet must uphold Pyroxian traditions. Beyond the diplomatic considerations, Ariella pressed gently, there are personal ones. Yes, Cade acknowledged. The rituals described in the ancient texts suggest our connection is permanent. More than that, they hint at a kind of resonance between us, a sharing of experiences, perceptions. I've felt it, Ariella confirmed. Moments when I sense your presence even across the palace. Flashes of your emotional state during particularly intense negotiations. The Human Alliance has no protocol for this situation, Cade said with a wry smile. Neither, I suspect, does Pyroxian tradition. Then perhaps we create new traditions, Ariella suggested. The treaty includes provisions for cultural exchange, educational programs, joint scientific ventures, but it doesn't address what might be the most profound connection between our peoples, the one we embody. What are you proposing, specifically? Cade asked, though his expression suggested he already understood her direction. A formal recognition of our unique status, not just as queen and consul, but as the first of what might become a new kind of relationship between Pyroxians and humans. The ancient texts call it flame bonding, a joining of different energies to create something greater than either alone. In human terms, Cade said carefully. That sounds remarkably like a marriage proposal. Is that how you interpret it? Ariella asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. It's how the Human Alliance will interpret it. Certainly, Cade replied. A political union between the Pyroxian monarch and the human representative would complicate matters. Or simplify them, Ariella countered. What better symbol of our new alliance than its embodiment in us? Besides, she added, her tone softening, I think we both know this connection goes beyond politics, or even the effects of the ritual. Cade was silent for a long moment, his newly acquired thermal sense revealing the subtle fluctuations in Ariella's inner fire, a pattern he had come to recognize as nervousness beneath her regal composure. The Human Alliance sent me here to forge new bonds between our peoples, he said finally. I don't think this is quite what they had in mind, but I can't argue with the effectiveness of the approach. He took her hand, their palms meeting in that perfect balance of energy that neither scorched nor chilled. In human diplomatic terms, I accept your proposal, Queen Ariella, both the political alliance it represents and the personal commitment it entails. The formal signing of the Pyrian Human Alliance Treaty became something far more significant than originally planned. Before representatives from both civilizations, Queen Ariella and Consul Lennox not only sealed the diplomatic agreement, but also underwent a modified version of the traditional Pyroxian flame-binding ceremony, adapted to acknowledge and celebrate their unique hybrid natures. The ceremony took place in the newly renovated Moonfire Hall, where crystal channels had been installed to carry flowing magma in intricate patterns across the floor and walls, symbolizing the intertwining of different paths into a unified whole. Diplomatic representatives from various human worlds sat alongside Pyroxian nobles, the traditional separation of species deliberately dissolved for the occasion. Ariella wore a gown that combined traditional Pyroxian royal regalia with subtle elements of human design, flowing lines and softer materials that complemented, rather than competed, with the more angular, Pyroxian aesthetic. Cade's attire similarly blended both worlds. The formal diplomatic uniform of the human alliance, augmented with crystalline elements that caught and refracted the light of his now permanent inner fire. Duke Erix, in his capacity as Chancellor, presided over the ceremony. Today marks not just the alliance of two great civilizations, he announced to the assembled dignitaries, but the birth of a new understanding between them. In Queen Ariella and Consul Lennox, we see the physical embodiment of what our cooperation can achieve, not the subjugation of one tradition to another, but the creation of something greater than either alone. The diplomatic treaty was signed first, its terms establishing frameworks for technological exchange, cultural programs, mutual defense, and economic cooperation. But it was the personal union that followed that truly captured the imagination of all present. Ariella and Cade stood at the center of the hall, their hands joined. Around them, specially designed thermal conduits activated, creating a swirling pattern of heat and light that responded to their combined energy signatures. "Through fire, we are transformed," Ariella recited, speaking the ancient words of the flame-binding ritual. "Through union, we are strengthened. Through understanding, we evolve," Cade responded, completing the traditional exchange with words that had been adapted for their unique circumstances. "Through difference, we find harmony." Together, they pressed their free hands against the phoenix crown, which had been placed on a crystalline pedestal between them. The crown responded to their touch, glowing with intensified inner fire before separating into two interconnected circlets, one for each of them. Ariella placed the larger circlet on her head, then took the smaller one and set it upon Cade's brow. The moment the crown touched him, his inner fire flared visibly, the Pyroxian essence within him resonating with the ancient symbol of authority. "I name you Cade Lennox, flame consort of Pyrrhion, bearer of the shared fire, and ambassador of two worlds," Ariella proclaimed. The assembled court erupted in the traditional Pyroxian celebration, a controlled release of thermal energy that sent waves of warmth throughout the hall, accompanied by a harmonic resonance created by specially tuned crystal formations. The human representatives, though initially startled by the sensation, soon joined in with their own traditions, applause and vocal acclaim. In the months that followed, Pyrrhion underwent a transformation almost as profound as that of its queen and her consort. The ancient blood rites, once shrouded in secrecy and manipulation, were open to scholarly study and reform. The pure flame law was established, giving every Pyroxian citizen the right to have their bloodline examined for evidence of unauthorized manipulation, with procedures developed to reverse such tampering. Relations with the Albai Empire remained tense, the exposed conspiracy creating diplomatic ripples throughout the Taurus galaxy. But with the combined strength of Pyrrhion and the human alliance, open conflict was averted. The Empire, dealing with internal power struggles following Prince Cassian's disgrace, had little choice but to accept the new reality of Pyroxian independence. Perhaps the most profound change came in the everyday interactions between Pyroxians and humans. What had once been formal, cautious diplomatic exchanges evolved into genuine cultural interchange. Human scientists worked alongside Pyroxian thermal specialists to develop new technologies. Pyroxian artisans taught human apprentices the ancient crafts of crystal shaping and heat forging. On the first anniversary of their union, Ariella and Cade stood on the royal balcony overlooking Thalia, watching as a new monument was unveiled in the central plaza, a massive crystal sculpture depicting intertwined flames, one representing Pyroxian fire, the other human ingenuity. As the covering fell away, the sculpture caught the light of Pyrrhion's setting sun, sending prismatic reflections across the gathered crowds. "A year ago, I couldn't touch anything without destroying it," Ariella mused. "Now, look at what we've built together." "Not bad for a diplomatic mission that started with me interrupting your coronation," Cade replied, his arm comfortably around her waist. Their moment of reflection was interrupted by an attendant, bringing news that representatives from a previously uncontacted world had arrived, requesting audience with the rulers whose touch transforms rather than destroys. The stories of their unique bond had spread far beyond Pyrrhion, it seemed. Shall we receive them together? Cade asked. Always, Ariella replied, taking his hand. As they turned to re-enter the palace, a young child caught their attention, a small figure darting between the legs of court officials in the corridor. What made this child remarkable was her appearance. The inner fire of a pyroxian visible beneath skin that had the more resilient texture of a human's. One of the first pyroxian human children born since the Alliance. Her existence represented the most profound transformation of all. The child paused upon seeing them, offering a formal bow that dissolved into childish giggles before she ran off again, leaving tiny footprints of warmth on the crystal floor. The future, Ariella said simply, watching the child disappear around a corner. A future neither of us could have imagined when everything you touched turned to ash, Cade agreed. Together, they walked into the palace to meet the new arrivals, their complementary energies creating a subtle glow where their hands joined, a visible symbol of the transformation that had altered not just their own destinies, but that of two civilizations now bound in common purpose. The Great Hall had been prepared for the diplomatic reception, its vast space transformed with both pyroxian and human design elements. Crystal formations caught and redirected the natural thermal energy of the planet, creating comfortable zones for visitors of various physiologies. The blending of aesthetic principles, pyroxian angular precision, softened by human organic curves, had become the hallmark of the new architectural movement sweeping Thalia. The unannounced visitors proved to be representatives from the distant world of Neros, a civilization that had maintained isolationist policies for centuries. Their delegation, led by an imposing figure whose skin seemed to shimmer with an iridescent quality, approached the royal dais with evident curiosity. Queen Ariella, Consort Cade, the leader began, speaking through a translation device. Tales of your unique bond have reached even our remote systems. We come seeking to understand if what we have heard is true, that opposites can join without destruction, that difference can become strength rather than weakness. Ariella stepped forward, Cade at her side. Ambassador Thylon of Neros, we welcome you to Pyrrhion. The stories you have heard contain truth, though perhaps not the whole of it. She gestured to the diverse gathering around them, pyroxians and humans mingling freely, engaged in earnest conversation. What you see is not the result of our bond alone, but of thousands of individuals choosing connection over isolation, understanding over fear. Yet it began with you, the Nerosan insisted, with a curse transformed into blessing. It began with a curse. Yes, Cade acknowledged. But the transformation came through choice, many choices, made by many people. The willingness to risk, to trust, to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. As the diplomatic exchange continued, Ariella sensed a familiar presence approaching, Serenelle Fireseer, who had survived her final spell against Voron's forces, though at great cost. The elder Fire Witch now moved with the assistance of a crystalline staff, her inner flame diminished but not extinguished. She had become a respected advisor to the court, her knowledge of ancient blood magic proving invaluable during the reforms. The Nerosans bring more than curiosity, Serenelle whispered when she reached the royal couple. They bring warning. Their world stands at the boundary between our galaxy and the void beyond. They have detected movement. What kind of movement? Cade asked, his diplomatic instincts immediately alert. Something approaching, Serenelle replied cryptically. Something neither pyroxian nor human. Perhaps that is why they seek understanding of how different natures can coexist, They fear what comes will test all our civilizations. Ariella and Cade exchanged a glance, their shared connection, allowing communication beyond words. The past year had been focused on rebuilding, on establishing their new unified society. They had not considered that their alliance might soon face external threats. We should continue this discussion more privately, Ariella suggested to the Neurosan ambassador. Perhaps you would join us in the council chamber after the reception. As the formal pleasantries continued, Ariella found her thoughts drifting to the child they had glimpsed earlier, and to all the children who would inherit the world they were building. What challenges would they face? What new transformations would they undergo? The path ahead remained uncertain, but one thing was clear. The curse that had once isolated her had become the catalyst for a connection that transcended individual worlds. Whatever came from beyond the galaxy's edge would face not isolated civilizations, but a unified response, forged in the same transformative fire that had turned destruction into creation, isolation into alliance, and fear into hope. Later that evening, as Ariella and Cade stood on their private balcony, overlooking the flowing lava fields beyond the city, the thermal essence crystal that had guided them to the flame sanctum a year earlier began to pulse with an unfamiliar rhythm on its display pedestal. Its amber light shifted to a deep blue, then back again, in a pattern that seemed almost like a distant heartbeat. Another transformation begins, Cade observed quietly. Yes, Ariella agreed, leaning into his embrace. But this time, we face it together. The crystals pulsing illuminated their faces in alternating warmth and coolness, a visual echo of the balance they had achieved between their once opposing natures. Above them, in the ash-laden skies of Pyrrhion, new stars appeared, or perhaps they had always been there, waiting to be noticed by those who had finally learned to look beyond their own world. Everything she had touched had once turned to ash. Now, everything they touched together turned toward possibility, an endless horizon of potential transformations, each building upon the last in an eternal cycle of destruction and renewal, separation and union, ending and beginning. And in that balance lay their greatest strength.